How could you sell the apartment? My son screamed, his voice shaking with rage. I already promised it to my wife. Before we begin, a huge thank you to all of you. We've officially hit 500 subscribers. It's a small milestone but a big deal for us. And now, our eyes are set on the 1,000 subscribers goal. To help us get there, please hit the like button. Subscribe so you never miss a story. And let me know in the comments where you're watching from and how you're doing. Your support truly encourages us and keeps this channel going now. Let's jump into the story. My name is Eleanor, and I am 65 years old. Until 6 months ago, I didn't realize I had become invisible. Invisible to my son. Invisible to his wife. Invisible even to myself. I lived alone in a modest 2-bedroom apartment my late husband and I bought decades ago. The walls were aging, the kitchen was small, and the furniture was outdated, but it was home. It was the last place where I still felt like I mattered. My husband passed away 7 years ago, quietly, in his sleep. No goodbyes, no warnings, just gone. After that, my days blurred into a routine of silence. I woke up early, made coffee in the same rattling machine, swept the floor, and stared out the window as if I were waiting for something to happen. Maybe I was waiting for my son, Ryan, to remember I existed. Ryan was my only child. After his father's death, I believed we'd grow closer. Instead, he drifted further away. A short phone call every couple of weeks. A rushed visit on holidays, always busy. Always distracted. When he came over, he sat on the couch scrolling through his phone. Checking the time, treating each minute with me like an obligation. I smiled anyway. Because mothers do that. When Ryan married Megan, I thought things might change. At first, she was warm hug, sweet words, cheap flowers from the grocery store. I clung to that kindness like a lifeline, but slowly, the mask slipped. Her eyes began scanning the apartment, measuring it, judging it, calculating its worth. Then the comments started. This place is so old, you should really renovate. When this apartment is ours, we'll change everything. When it's ours, that was when I understood. To them, I wasn't a mother. I wasn't family. I was an obstacle. The moment that shattered me came one afternoon when they thought I wasn't listening. From the bathroom, I heard them talking about how much my apartment was worth and how they'd use it after I was gone. That day, something inside me died, but something else was born. And that quiet decision I made that afternoon would soon turn their entire world upside down. They thought they were waiting for my death, but I had other plans. I didn't confront them that day. After overhearing that conversation, I quietly stepped back into my bedroom and sat on the edge of the bed, my heart pounding so loudly I was afraid they'd hear it. My hands were shaken not from fear, but from something colder, realization, the kind that burns. They were still in the living room, laughing softly, talking about their future, a future funded by my absence. When I finally came out, Megan smiled like nothing had happened. "Oh, Eleanor, we didn't know you were home." A lie, they knew. They just didn't care. Ryan barely looked up from his phone. I offered them coffee. They declined. 10 minutes later, they left. Just like always, taking their plans with them and leaving me behind in silence. That night, I sat alone on the couch, they mocked, staring at the ceiling. And for the first time, I asked myself a question that terrified me. When did I become someone people were waiting to disappear? The next morning, I woke up different. Not hopeful, not sad, just clear. I pulled out an old notebook from a drawer I hadn't opened in years. Page by page, I wrote everything down. Every comment, every humiliation, every moment I'd swallowed my pain to keep the peace. By the time I finished, 5 pages were filled with proof that I hadn't imagined any of it. And still, they didn't stop. 2 weeks later, Ryan and Megan came over again, this time with purpose. "Mom," Ryan said, skipping any greeting, "we need to talk." They were house hunting. Prices were high. Life was unfair. Megan leaned forward, hands folded sweetly. "Eleanor, this apartment is really too big for you alone. 2 bedrooms. It's kind of a waste, don't you think?" I said nothing. "Well," she continued, "maybe you could move somewhere smaller and sell this place to us. A family price, of course. Family price." Ryan sighed dramatically. "Don't be selfish, Mom. You're not going to need it much longer anyway." Those words landed like a slap. I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw them out. Instead, I nodded slowly and said, "I'll think about it." They left satisfied, confident I'd give in because I always did. But this time, something was different. The guilt never came. Instead, what filled me was resolve, cold, steady, unshakable. Over the next 3 weeks, Ryan called every day. Not once did he ask how I was. Only the same question, over and over. "Have you decided?" And with every call, my answer stayed the same. Not yet. What he didn't know was that while he was waiting, I was already taking my first steps toward a decision that would change everything. And the next place I walked into wasn't my son's house. It was the bank. The bank was quiet that afternoon. Too quiet. The kind of quiet that makes your own thoughts sound louder. I hadn't gone there with a plan. I told myself I was just updating paperwork, nothing more. But while I waited, sitting in a hard plastic chair, I overheard 2 women talking a few seats away. One of them laughed softly and said, "My mother-in-law finally sold her house, bought a small condo, and took a trip with the rest. She said she spent her whole life living for others and now she's done." The other woman replied, "Wow, that takes courage. My family would never allow that." Allow? That word stuck to me like a thorn. Why should anyone allow me to live my own life? By the time my number was called, my hands were steady. My heart wasn't. Something had shifted inside me quietly, but permanently. A few hours later, back in my apartment, I sat at the kitchen table with my laptop open. I searched for real estate agencies. I picked one with solid reviews and dialed the number before I could talk myself out of it. "I want to sell my apartment," I said. Quickly, discreetly. The agent came the next day. A polite man in his 40s, professional, efficient. He walked through the rooms, took photos, made notes. At the end, he looked at me and said, "If you want to sell fast, you could get around 220,000. I didn't hesitate. "Let's do it." He blinked. "You don't want to discuss this with your family?" "No," I said calmly. "I don't." Within days, there was an offer. Cash. No complications. I accepted. All the while, Ryan kept calling. "Mom, we found the perfect house." "Mom, Megan's really anxious." "Mom, don't make this difficult." I smiled into the phone and said, "I'm still thinking." But behind the scenes, I was packing. I bought a small 1-bedroom apartment in a quiet neighborhood. Bright windows, clean walls, no memories attached. I paid for it outright. The rest of the money went into an account in my name, my safety, my future. The move happened fast. I took only what mattered: clothes, photos, books. Everything else was just noise. 3 weeks later, I stood alone in my new apartment, keys in my hand, sunlight spilling across the floor. For the first time in years, I felt something I barely recognized: peace. But I wasn't naive. I knew Ryan wouldn't stay calm for long, because people who feel entitled don't accept no. And when he finally found out what I'd done, the explosion would be unforgettable. And that explosion came sooner than I ever expected. The call came on a Tuesday afternoon. I was still unpacking boxes in my new apartment, arranging books on a small shelf, enjoying the quiet. My phone buzzed. Ryan. His voice sounded unusually cheerful. "Mom, good timing. Megan and I want to take you out to dinner on Friday. Our treat." I froze. Ryan had never invited me to dinner before. Not once. Still, I replied calmly, "All right. What time?" That was when I knew something was coming. Friday evening arrived, and I dressed with care not to impress them, but to remind myself who I was. When Ryan picked me up, Megan greeted me with a smile so wide it felt rehearsed. Her eyes were cold, calculating. The restaurant was quiet, tucked away in a corner, perfect for private conversations. For the first few minutes, they talked about nothing: work, weather, people I didn't know. Then Ryan cleared his throat. "Mom, we're worried about you." Megan leaned in. "You're all alone in that big apartment. At your age, anything could happen. A fall, an emergency." I nodded slowly. "That's why," Ryan continued, "we think it would be best if you sold the apartment. Maybe bought something smaller, closer to us." There it was. Megan added softly, "And maybe you could help us with the down payment. As an advance? On the inheritance." Inheritance. I took a sip of water. "I'll think about it." Ryan's jaw tightened. "Mom, we need an answer." "We already told the owner yes. So your plan," I said gently, "depends entirely on me giving you my home." Silence. The rest of the dinner passed in tension. When they dropped me off, Megan hugged me stiffly. "Think about it, Eleanor. We're family." The next days were relentless. Photos of houses, messages about future grandchildren, calls filled with pressure, not concern. Every word was wrapped in sweetness, but underneath was demand. Then Megan showed up at my old apartment unannounced. She cried, apologized, spoke of desperation, of hope. I asked her one simple question. "If I had nothing, no apartment, no money, would you still be here?" She couldn't answer. That night, sitting alone in my new home, I organized everything: documents, bank statements, contracts, and something else. Proof. I had started recording our conversations weeks earlier, not out of spite, but I knew how stories could be twisted. I was ready, because deep down, I knew this wasn't over. Ryan wasn't the type to accept losing what he believed was his, and sooner or later, he would come demanding answers face to face. And when he did, he wasn't prepared for what I was about to tell him. Ryan didn't call before showing up. I heard the knock just after sunrise, sharp, impatient, angry. The kind of knock that doesn't ask to be let in, but demands it. When I opened the door, he stood there with Megan behind him, arms crossed, eyes blazing. No greetings, no pleasantries. "How could you do this?" Ryan snapped, stepping inside without waiting for permission. "Do what?" I asked calmly, closing the door. "You sold the apartment." Megan shouted. "We went to the bank to finalize paperwork, and they told us everything was done." Done. Ryan's face was red. "I already promised that place to my wife. You embarrassed us." I looked at them, really looked. To adults furious because their plan had failed. "I didn't promise you anything," I said quietly. Ryan slammed his hand on the table. "That apartment was supposed to be mine." "No," I replied. "It was supposed to be my home." Megan scoffed. "You're being selfish. At your age, what do you even need all that money for?" That question settled heavily in the room. I took a breath. I needed to live. Ryan laughed bitterly. "Live? You sit alone all day. We were doing you a favor." I walked to the cabinet and pulled out a folder. Inside were copies of the sale contract, bank statements, and something else: printed transcripts. "I recorded our conversations," I said, placing them on the table. "Every time you pressured me. Every time you talked about my death like it was a deadline." Megan's face drained of color. "You can't do that," Ryan said weakly. "I already did." They went quiet. "I gave my life to you, Ryan," I continued. "I worked double shifts. I skipped dreams so you could have yours. And somewhere along the way, you stopped seeing me as a mother and started seeing me as property." Ryan's voice cracked. "You ruined our future." I shook my head. "No, I saved mine. Megan stood abruptly. Fine. Keep your money. Don't come crying to us later. They left without another word. The silence afterward was deep. Final. That evening, I sat by the window, watching the city lights flicker on. I wasn't crying. I wasn't shaking. I felt free. But freedom has a price. I knew what I'd done couldn't be undone. I had cut the final thread. And while I was at peace with my choice, I had no idea what Ryan would do next, because humiliation often turns into revenge. And the next move he made shocked me more than everything that came before. The first letter arrived a week later. It was official-looking heavy cream paper, my name typed neatly at the top. I opened it slowly, already sensing trouble. Inside was a notice from a lawyer, Ryan's lawyer. He was contesting the sale, claiming I had been manipulated, that I was no longer mentally fit to make major financial decisions, and that the apartment had been promised to him verbally years ago. I laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was predictable. 2 days later, a second letter arrived. This one accused me of emotional instability. Suggested a court-appointed evaluation. The implication was clear. If he couldn't take my home, he would take my dignity. I didn't panic. I called my own attorney that same afternoon. A sharp woman named Claire, calm voice, steady eyes. She listened without interrupting, then asked one question. Do you have proof? I slid the folder across her desk. The recordings, the messages, the transcripts, dates, times, everything. Claire smiled slightly. Good, very good. Ryan didn't stop there. He started calling relatives, old friends, people I hadn't spoken to in years, telling them I was confused, that I was being taken advantage of, that I needed supervision. Suddenly, my phone filled with concerned messages. Are you okay? Ryan says you're not well. Do you need help? I answered calmly, briefly, truthfully. I'm fine, and I've made my own decisions. The court date came faster than I expected. When I walked into the courtroom, Ryan wouldn't meet my eyes. Megan sat beside him, jaw tight, lips pressed thin. Their lawyer spoke first painted me as lonely, aging, impulsive, a woman acting out of grief. Then Claire stood. She played the recordings. Ryan's voice filled the room. Talking about inheritance, about timeline, about how I wouldn't need it much longer. The judge listened in silence. When it was over, the room felt smaller. The ruling was swift. The sale was valid. My competence was never in question. The case was dismissed. Ryan stared at the floor. Outside the courthouse, Megan hissed. You didn't have to humiliate us like that. I looked at her calmly. You did that yourselves. I walked away without turning back. But that wasn't the end. Because losing in court didn't stop Ryan. It only changed his strategy. And this time, he came after me in a way I never expected. And what he did next forced me to make the hardest decision of my life. The next morning, my phone rang. It was Ryan. Mom, we need to talk. Face to face, he said, voice quieter than I'd ever heard. Not angry. Not demanding. Just tense. I hesitated. Part of me wanted to ignore him. Part of me wanted to see what he would do next. I finally agreed, knowing this wasn't about reconciliation, it was about strategy. He arrived at my apartment that afternoon. He looked different, thinner. The sharp arrogance in his eyes softened into something I hadn't seen before, desperation. Megan stayed home. This time, it was just him. We sat across from each other at my small dining table. He avoided eye contact. Mom, he began, I realize I treated you horribly. I didn't see what you did for me, what you sacrificed. I let him speak, nodding slightly. His words were awkward, stilted, too rehearsed, but there was emotion there. I didn't interrupt. I waited. I came here to apologize, he continued. I've been seeing a therapist. I know I can't undo the past, but I want to try to do better. For you? I studied him. Every word sounded like an effort, a push against years of habit. But I didn't let relief show. Ryan, I said finally, apology is not enough. You've spent years seeing me as a resource, not as a person. A mother isn't an ATM. You never asked how I was. You never noticed my life. And now you come asking for forgiveness as if that fixes everything. He flinched. He lowered his gaze. I know, he whispered. I want a chance to make things right. I took a slow breath. A chance? Perhaps, but you must understand something. Trust isn't given, it's earned. And it won't happen overnight. You've spent decades I've spent decades silent. He nodded, shame written across his face. I understand. I'll try. I promise I'll try. That was the turning point, not because I forgave him entirely, but because he finally admitted it, finally acknowledged the truth of his behavior, finally faced the consequences of treating me as invisible. We sat in silence for a while. Not tense, not angry, just quiet. The kind of silence that marks the beginning of something fragile, something new. I realized then that reclaiming my life didn't just mean defending my home or my finances. It meant reclaiming my dignity, my voice, my right to exist without being used. And it meant letting go of expectations, of how others should be, holding only myself accountable. For my own peace, for the first time in decades, I felt something I hadn't felt in years: control. But little did I know, the real test of that control was yet to come. Weeks passed. Life in my new apartment settled into a rhythm I hadn't felt in years. Sunlight streamed through the windows in the mornings. My plants thrived. My books were arranged just the way I liked. And for the first time, the quiet didn't feel empty, it felt like freedom. I returned to painting. At first, I hesitated, unsure if my hands could still express what my heart carried. But the brushes moved easily now, no longer shaky or uncertain. I painted chaos. I painted light. I painted everything I had held inside for decades. Each stroke was mine alone. Each color a choice I made for me, not for Ryan. Not for Megan. Not for anyone. And then, one afternoon, a small knock on the door interrupted my quiet. It was Ryan. Alone. No Megan this time. I wanted to see your work, he said, holding a small bouquet of wildflowers. His eyes looked hesitant, unsure if he was welcome. I let him in, silently, and watched as he wandered around, looking at my paintings. He stopped at the first piece, the dark one, and murmured, "This is how it felt before, isn't it?" I nodded. He turned to the chaotic middle painting. "And this is the storm I caused." "Yes," I replied softly. He finally looked at the bright, luminous painting. "And this is you. Now." I nodded again. Ryan took a deep breath. "I've thought a lot these past months. I get it now. You didn't take anything from me. You gave me something I never had. An example, a lesson. And even though it hurt at first, I understand it was right." I said nothing, just let him speak. And for the first time, he stayed. Not to demand, not to manipulate, just to be present. We talked for hours. He admitted his mistakes. He shared the therapy sessions, the reflections, the ways he was trying to change. And though I didn't fully forgive him, I acknowledged the effort. I let him stay for the time he earned, not because of entitlement, but because of honesty. That night, alone in my apartment, I looked at my hands, paint, and felt something I hadn't felt in decades: completion. I had reclaimed my home, my dignity, my choices. I had stood up to manipulation, to greed, to fear, and I had survived. I had discovered a truth I never wanted to forget. The most important relationship I could have was the one with myself. My life, my rules, my peace. And in that moment, I realized something deeper: freedom isn't just about money, or property, or control. Freedom is living fully, even if others try to take it from you. Freedom is choosing yourself. Ryan may change. He may not, but I no longer needed him to validate my worth. I had already found it within myself. And as I placed Ryan's small bouquet of wildflowers in a vase, sunlight spilling over them, I knew one thing for certain. No one, not even my own son, would ever take my life, my choices, or my peace away again. If this story touched your heart, tell me in the comments, what city are you watching from? Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this story so more people remember. No matter how old you are, it's never too late to stand up for yourself.